love that song. Well, hello and good evening, my lovely people. I am your host, Mr. Takeover, and we are sitting on the sofa yet again with the lovely Miss Whitney, where she is indulging in another great. And the laugh just goes with the fact that I I try not to say that she's picking on me for this book, but uh, I'm just going. We're gonna go ahead and talk to my lawyer and we. She did not call me and say, I know I don't know you, but this is a particular book that I'm coming out, and yeah, I might just be picking on you. But welcome, Miss Whitney, to another
Thank,
lovely night.
thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure.
You can go ahead and say it's always a pleasure to pick on you, Laura.
I'm
It's,
not that.
it's okay.
I
It's okay.
promise
I'm
I'm
not gonna
not
cry.
going to say that.
It's okay. Um, so, what are we talking about tonight?
Okay, as we have moved faithfully through the chapters in my book, Truth Speak, Some Real Reasons Men and Women Don't Communicate, tonight we'll be dealing with chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. Well, actually, just 10, 11, and 12. We covered 9 last time. But
Okay.
we'll be dealing with the timing of certain discussions. We'll be
Okay.
dealing with fair fighting, which is an absolutely enjoyable chapter. And then we'll be dealing with shopping together, men and women style, if we want to call it that.
Okay.
And as we typically begin with a review, we've brought to the screen here the slides that I'd like to share tonight. Last time we were together, we dealt with some common mistakes between men and women and the mistakes that they make toward each other and toward the opposite gender. And
Okay.
we dealt with one of those mistakes being stereotypes, how to define a masculine and feminine interest without applying stereotypes and prejudging the person. And we talked about the idea that you make a suggestion, not an assumption. You ask the man, is he interested in cars? Would he like this magazine? You ask the woman if she's interested in shoes. Would she like this catalog?
Mhm.
Versus just assuming you're a man, so you're going to like this power tools book. You're a woman, so you're going to like this recipe book. No, you make a
Yeah,
suggestion.
because a lot of women out here are loving. Actually, my wife loves power tools, so we both be geeking out when we go in Lowe's. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We also covered that a compliment must be delivered better toward the recipient than what the person intends. If I intend to say that you're attractive by comparing you to someone that you don't feel is attractive, then it's not a compliment anymore.
hmm,
So if you're going to deliver a compliment, you have to fit that to the hearer's reception more than anything.
okay,
And then we talked about reading each other's minds. We actually talked more about not reading each other's minds and the idea that you cannot read someone's mind. So you need to be able to speak whatever the concern is. And ladies have a reputation for saying that nothing is wrong when their behavior says the exact opposite. On the other side, men also have a reputation for not talking about serious things. So we can't be expected to read each other's minds. We have to be more verbally communicative, even if
right,
sometimes in the moment it's uncomfortable.
okay,
We also talked about don't fake it. In a book about communication between men and women, someone reads the title Don't Fake It. They're probably likely to assume that we're talking about something sexual, particularly orgasms and the reputation that women have for faking those. As we began this discussion, that wasn't what we were talking about, but I will touch on that for just a moment as we review the material.
okay,
I began talking about Don't fake your interest. If you're not interested in something, don't pretend that you are,
Whew.
because if your pretending engages the other person and then you have nothing left to say, what happens with that interest that you've awakened in them? You have nowhere to go with it, and it plummets off a cliff. To
Yeah.
prevent that, to prevent that, just don't fake. Don't pretend that you're interested in things that you're not. Ladies, if he gives you an ugly sweater, do not swear up and down that you like it, because you will get the matching scarf and gloves, and then you'll have to fake that you like that too. Don't do that. Just don't do that at all. And on the point of orgasms, ladies, you shouldn't fake those either. It makes no sense to pretend that you have more money in the bank that you do. You would be upset with your bank if they told you that you had $10 million
I've
dollars when you really don't.
I've actually had that done to me before. Yeah, my ex-wife, at the end of our marriage, was like, well, um, no, she know what? No, let me take that back. She never had any. She stated.
Oh, wow.
I don't think she knew. And I'm not and not trying to redeem myself, but I really feel like she didn't really know herself to know if she did or not. Uh, but yeah, so she may have not, but we didn't do it that much anyway. Out of 13 years, unfortunately, sad,
Mm.
tragic, but yeah,
Well, you've pointed out throughout our discussions that you are a unicorn. There are special situations that you have displayed and you have shared with us that you've been a part of that may not exactly apply to everybody in their various situations. When I'm talking about women who fake it, I'm talking about the ones who know full well that they're not experiencing what they
right.
claim to experience, and then they say that they do.
Yeah,
Perhaps
and
so
I
that,
knew that's what you was meant, and I had to think about it. I was gonna say she did, but no, when I thought about it, no, she just basically said, nah, she didn't have any. So there wasn't no
mm,
faking, she just didn't have any. But yes, I've definitely on TikTok and stuff. I'm glad you brought it up because that's gonna be another question that I ask on TikTok. So thank you.
wonderful. Okay, very cool. And the last point on not faking it, we deal with sports knowledge.
Okay.
Ladies, ladies, if you grew up in a house where it was customary to paint one side of your face one team color and the other side of your face the other team color, and you have a generational history of supporting a certain sports team, don't dumb that down just so that the man you're with will feel some type of emboldening regarding your sports knowledge. Because if you take it out of a sports context, anything that is that much a part of who you are will eventually be brought to the table in a relationship. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can be honest with him about whatever it is about you that is innate to your being, then you might not be able to have a healthy, cohesive relationship with him. Don't dumb down sports knowledge just because it's assumed that as a woman you're not supposed to have it, or you're supposed to have less than what the man knows to whom you're speaking. Don't do that, because again, once you start it, that's kind of where you have to keep it.
Right.
And once you keep it that way for long enough, you begin to suffocate yourself. And then you're wondering why you're no longer happy with this person that you used to build your whole days around. So don't fake it. If you know, you know. If he can handle it, he can handle it. If he can't, he can't. If it's that much a part of you, it's going to come out anyway. Better that it does early so that you know the kind of character of the man that you're getting involved with.
Right.
We also talked about priorities. When you're thinking about the characteristics in a person that you like to be in a relationship with, there are needs and there are wants. You can want someone who is a certain physical composition, but you need someone who is a certain character composition. I'm not saying that you can't have what you need and what you want in the same individual. I'm only defining them verbally with such distinction so that the value can be assessed.
Right.
Because the blessing is when you find what you want and what you need in the same person. It is absolutely possible. But the first step would be for people to make a list of what they want and a list of what they need, and make sure that when they're picking the person that they really want to date, hopefully that person has both their wants and their needs, But if they have more of their needs, that is an optimal situation, and the want can be incorporated as you move forward.
Right.
And let's move to the next slide.
Okay.
Ah.
Ooh, communication process.
Now, for those who were with us last time, I had said that the presentation was shared in a way that was different from what we had become accustomed to in our sessions. This time, I will be able to illustrate the communication process. And I know you feel I'm excited about this right now. I'm absolutely
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. This is what I was trying to share with us the last time we were together. You have a man and you have a woman who are in conversation. The first, he will say something, and then the woman will hear his words and have to filter his words through her own processes. That could be her upbringing, that could be a past situation, that could be any stereotypes that she holds, that could be her own maturity level, and anything that happened that morning before she can comprise a response to deliver back to him.
Okay.
Now, when he hears that response, he has to filter that response through his process, his upbringing, his past situations, his stereotypes, his maturity level, or his lack thereof, and anything that may have happened to him that day before he can return a response to her. Suppose he doesn't understand. That's the time that he will ask a question. She'll hear his question, run it through, and not understand why he had that question. So she'll
Mm-hmm.
ask him a question. And now he's responding to her question. She's responding to his, and understanding is achieved. That is how understanding is reached. When each person hears what the other person says, filters it through their experience, returns what they have yielded in their processing, that other person receives what they've been returned and filters it through their processing before we can get an understanding.
It's
That
almost kind of like in the process of the fair fight.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But this is the reason that it is called a communication process. It's not just a one shot stop where you dump all your words out and then you walk away. No, it's a
Mm-hmm.
process. One person speaks, the other listens, returns an answer, and then the first person hears that answer and returns their response.
Okay.
This is a process, okay, as we were talking about it. And these are just these two people here, correct? So, what happens? Okay, this is
Yeah, you finally got to work.
when understanding is achieved, that is communication. And I'm glad that happened because I want to take a moment to get into a quick thing that I've heard people try to say as a good point, but they're not recognizing where they're off with this thing that sounds good. People have begun to say communication is the first part, comprehension is the second.
Mm-hmm.
That is wrong because communication has comprehension inherent in its process. If understanding is not achieved, communication has not occurred. But at least for people to recognize that comprehension is a component in the discussion process, that is, at least halfway laudable.
Okay.
At least recognizing that they need to comprehend what's being said. But to break those two things out as if they're separate shows a lack of understanding of what communication actually is, because you cannot have communication unless comprehension was achieved.
Okay.
Just like eating food, you shouldn't have to eat food with no flavor. The flavor is inherent in the food. So is the comprehension inherent in communication. If it is not, communication has not taken place. So after we achieve the understanding, we have the communication. Both people understand where both people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Process has enough layers in an optimal situation. But what happens when there's an interrupter? It starts the same over if a woman began the conversation versus if a man had begun it. But when there's an interrupter, how does this interruption occur? Society, your moms, your dads, your cousins, your sisters, your teachers, your friends,
Don't
social
like
media,
them people.
magazines you read, everybody who has some kind of influence on you can
Mm-hmm.
complicate this communication process because it is there where you will experience the things that become impediments to your communication process. Not the communication process, but
Right.
your communication process. And as the next part of our review, we have a question. And we talked about this in the first part. How do you determine what's a feminine interest versus what's a masculine interest without using stereotypes? And we said to just ask, make a suggestion, not an assumption.
Okay.
And these are the examples that we gave. And review four dealt with the explanation of the cover of my book. Here we have the man and the woman. Understanding was achieved. When women lie that they don't want anything for Valentine's Day and get
Yeah.
upset, and the man does nothing, which is exactly what she said she wanted, that is, in my book, absolute foolishness. And when I said my book, I meant figuratively, but it's also very literal. So, the lies and the behavior that women can exude around Valentine's Day can become an impediment to the understanding process. For guys who say, I'm doing fine, when there are serious problems that he really doesn't want to talk about, that's another brick that's built upon the understanding that smashes it down essentially. When women say nothing is wrong when it's obvious that there is, that's
Right.
another impediment to the communication process. And when men lead a woman on by treating her like they are in an exclusive relationship, and then when she sees him out with someone else, he falls back on, we were never exclusive. I never said this was a relationship, as a
Woo.
way of the accountability of what he had led the other woman to believe by his actions. That is an impediment to the communication process.
I know a lot of women's up in that situation right there, boy.
Exactly. And with sports, women, oh, you all are notorious for this. You want to engage a man who you know is involved in sports, but you pretend to know more about the sport than you do. And as soon as you pique his interest with those two little facts you know about sports, there's nowhere else to go because you don't have anything else to give to that conversation. So now, when you had his interest, you had his attention, you've almost shut it down and let it fall off a cliff because you've led him to believe that you're more knowledgeable about sports than you are. So there's nowhere you all can go with that.
Right. And
Now,
and I know you use the sports analogy situation a lot. Men, you can't be left out yourself, not to interrupt that you guys do the same thing when it comes to women and they're leading on peeping her interest is thinking that you watch a couple of binge watch shows with her and once you marry her then you like I don't watch that crap no more.
mhm, absolutely, absolutely, that practice can completely become an impediment to the communication process. Absolutely, it can. And for men, giving empty compliments will make a woman ultimately believe that you really don't mean anything you say. You're
Mm,
saying it because you think she eats up compliments, and that's your furthest expression of your effort to communicate with her, which is null. It's not an effort to communicate with her to give her an empty compliment just because you think women eat up compliments and anything you say nice is good enough. No, women don't want compliments. They want genuine compliments. If your compliment is genuine, let that stand for what it is. I personally would rather receive a genuine compliment once a week than empty compliments every 2 hours.
No.
The genuineness of the compliment is what women crave, not just compliments for the sake of hearing some flattering words. So when you continue to pour them on and slather her in them, that can become an impediment to the communication process from her side of it. She will begin to disbelieve how honest you are if all of your compliments are always empty.
Right.
And the man and the woman on each side of the bricks that have piled up, that stand between them now and impede their understanding, was the impetus for the cover design.
Okay.
You have a woman on one
Ah,
side
and the bricks.
and on the other side, and the various bricks that stand between them and the understanding process.
Don't set up and created a wall. Mm.
Exactly, exactly. And the beautiful thing about furthering this illustration was that this hammer down at the bottom that has my name on it,
Mm-hmm.
the purpose of it was that I am the hammer to break down those bricks and break down that wall between communication.
Okay.
Men and women.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. She's choosing violence.
Yes, absolutely. The, the hammer that breaks down the wall between men and women as far as communication is concerned. That is what this book is designed to be. After that, moving through the review, still, we're dealing with couples and dating. We went through the wants and the needs and relationship non negotiables, being trustworthy, being faithful, and some preferences are nice but not necessary for compatibility. But like I mentioned before in the review, one person can have both of those things. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a matter of each person knowing how to prioritize what is a want versus what is a need. And that one person that has both is the ideal, or at least a large enough percentage of both that the relationship can be sustained healthily. Now we begin our new material for tonight. Well,
Okay.
we did chapter 9 last time, the difference between hearing and listening.
All right.
Hearing, auditory function of your ears, but listening is deliberately engaging that function to receive the information that you hear. And we talked about the play on words. You hear me, but you're not listening,
Mm.
versus you're listening, but not hearing me.
Mm.
The better of the two would be that you were listening, but you weren't hearing, which means you were trying to understand the person, but not quite making the connection.
Huh.
We talked about venting versus problem solving. And when you realize that someone is venting, the first thing to do is keep listening. Don't just tune out because they're venting to you. Don't just tune out because you don't think that there's a problem that you're trying to solve. Active listening becomes what you need to do when you understand that they are just venting. And we talked about the reasons that people don't listen. If you're in your early 20s to mid 30s, many people are driven by stereotypes. So they don't listen to the person in front of them because they're driven by stereotypes. A man won't listen to the woman in front of him because he thinks that all women like shoes. So that must be what's on her mind. He's not paying attention to what she's actually saying about the 2 times that she's had foot surgeries in the last year.
Okay.
Okay. And when you're in your mid 30s or older, the subcategories rule what you think about the opposite gender. Now, the subcategories are not things that are as broad as stereotypes, they're isolated to your own experience. Such as there was a man that I gave the example of. He said every educated Black woman that he knew with a degree was crazy.
Mm.
So he wasn't saying that every black woman was crazy, just the educated ones with degrees. That subcategory he built from his own experience. And of course, you can imagine, foolishly, he said that at a table where 90% of the women were
Had a
black.
degree. Mm.
Yes, he actually made that mistake to say that out loud in the wrong audience. And
Tell my wife that. See what
he was devoured very politely.
happens.
I hadn't said a word. It was other people. I hadn't said anything because they said exactly what I would have. And they made the point that this is your experience. And even in your experience, you haven't dated every single available black
Person,
educated.
yeah.
So you can't say that that's true for all of them. Fair enough if you say the ones that you've dated, be specific, but not all of them in general. So that subcategory that he had devised from his experience was crafting his interactive parameters with black women who had degrees and based on his experience. Women do the same thing when they have trust issues toward men in general.
Uh-huh.
When one man has lied, every man becomes a liar. And these subcategories need to be resolved before both of them can move forward in a healthy interaction with the opposite gender. And one way to circumvent these subcategories or the stereotypes is just to be open-minded. Just talk to the
Okay.
person in front of you and not assume that they're thinking what you think they should think. Just ask them questions, talk to them, and get to know the person in front of you and not make all of your assumptions based on stereotypes or subcategories. And we talked about passive aggression, not being listening. And let me see if I can. Okay, yes, I am this. Okay, here we go. Yes.
Okay.
Passive aggression is anything that seems submissive or compliant in the present but has a retaliatory outcome. If you ask someone to do something for you, they say yes and then they don't do it. That could be that person deliberately letting you believe that they would that they would help you, but then allowing you to feel that letdown because they didn't, rather than just telling you no, that they didn't want to do it.
Mm. My kids do that.
And then we went over the question, is listening to reply passive aggressive? Yes, it is. When you listen to reply, you're looking submissive. You're looking like you're receiving that person. And when I say submissive, I don't just mean women. For every man out there who heard that and connected with
Yeah, you better correct yourself because they're going to eat that up. Ooh, ooh, you said.
when you are listening to reply, the act of listening makes you look receptive to what's being said, but you're really not because you are plotting your defense. You are plotting your retaliation for whatever those words are that you stand to defend yourself against. Now, this does not mean that if someone accuses you of something that you can't answer for it. Yes, you can. But listening just to reply is really passive aggressive. You should listen to hear the person and take note of the points that you would like to raise in counter and discussion and have questions before understanding is achieved and the
Uh,
communication process walks through. But stopping short of that, listening to reply really is passive aggressive. And then we ask the question, when was the last time you used passive aggression? In direct communication or other scenarios, do you even recognize when you are doing this? Now, I have really been excited about this, and I was jumped the gun a little bit when I said that we're going into the new material earlier. But
okay.
this, at chapter 10, really is where we're beginning the new material. We're starting in chapter 10 about the timing of the conversations that you have. Timing is everything. And the timing of a conversation can set or disrupt the believer's ability to focus on the delivered message. And because people's lives vary so greatly, the best time to talk is kind of difficult to pinpoint. So, what
Okay.
we're going to do is look at some times to avoid. And that way we can get some guidelines for how to structure certain conversations.
Okay.
Number one, don't talk right after work.
Oh, why not?
If a person has a mentally taxing job, they don't have any more emotional bandwidth to give to your conversation. And I have an asterisk with this one because there's one caveat that makes a difference. Unless you have told the person prior to them getting off work that you want to talk to them after work,
Mm-hmm.
don't bombard them as soon as they hit the door.
What?
And when I say letting them know ahead of time that you want to talk, that puts them in the mindset of, yes, I'm going home, but I'm not turning my brain off yet. That reserves some emotional bandwidth for them to engage in that conversation with you, because there are few things more discouraging than trying to talk and the person is not able to listen, and they're not making themselves available and capable of receiving whatever would be presented to them.
All
So, right
right.
to work isn't always the best time unless you've told them that you want to talk to them after work.
So from now on, unless I send my wife a message saying that I need to talk to her after work, I have to shut up when I go pick her up. Okay. Yep. You do not like me whatsoever, and that's all right. That's fine.
The point of this one is really just to avoid asking someone to process something mentally when
Yeah.
they don't have the capacity to do it. So if she does, and it's not a huge thing, and it can be handled without overburdening, go for it. Absolutely.
Man, man, all love is huge. Let me
But
see.
if it is, yeah, a warning or a setup or something should be implemented so that that person is ready to receive you and ready to process what you're offering or whatever you want to talk about.
Boy, I tell you.
Next time not to have a difficult conversation is right after you have fun. You're at a party, you have a great time. On the way home from the party, the person that you're at the party with tells you, oh, by the way, somebody broke into your car and I didn't want to tell you. All
Oh,
the fun that they just had at that party has just like gone away. It's like melted off of them. And it doesn't mean anything that it would have if you
what?
ruin their fun by giving them bad news right after in that sequence of events.
Dang.
Yeah, that's happened before. People, oh my goodness, that I have to be careful not to run off on a side tangent on that point. But yes, right after work, people are usually very mentally taxed, and it may not be the best time to process. But right after fun, they're relaxed, they're ready to have a good evening, and then you drop this bad news on them and totally ruin it. The other time not to have serious conversations, if you can avoid it at all, is the holiday. Avoid having serious conversations around the holidays. Some people live for the holidays. They have decorations and everything for every holiday that's on the calendar. Some people loathe the very idea of that.
Ball humbug.
But right, all year though, like all year, whichever way that person tends to shift on that spectrum of loving the holidays or hating them, particularly around Christmas, between after Thanksgiving, after Christmas to New Year's,
Hmm.
there's a lot of there's a lot of societal imposition to recognize a holiday. And some people have automatic barriers against even that. So if they're pushing against that that imposition that they're supposed to celebrate certain holidays.
Yeah.
Now you want to share something with them, they might be resistant to that too, just because that's where their mind is.
Okay.
On the side, if a person is embroiled in holiday and they throw glitter as they're walking down the street and they dance in the snow with hot chocolate and peppermints and pom-poms on their hats, are they really paying attention if you need to say something serious?
Nah.
Yeah,
Nope.
so those two conditions make the holidays a difficult time for hard discussions. If you can avoid it, try to. When you deliver bad news, it's never a good thing to say, I'll tell that person later. I'll tell them later. I'll tell her later. I'll tell her later. I'll tell her later. Because later usually happens a lot longer than you intend when you first say that. And now everything that you've tried to say that you should have said before looks like a lie to the person.
Yeah. Later just keeps going back later and later.
Yes. And that problem is easy to prevent if you talk to a person at the times where they could be most receptive to what you need to say and most able to process the things that need to be said to them. And the resolution to these issues, as I mentioned before, for timing,
Mm-hmm.
here are my people again.
Uh-oh.
Make an appointment to talk. That's what we talked about before. Tell your person that you need to talk to them after work. They don't have to write it down necessarily, but in their mind, that is an appointment to talk. That is a time that I know my mind will be allocated toward receiving whatever my person has to tell me.
Okay.
We're talking about particularly men to women, but you can have these communicative strategies implemented in any relationship that you have.
Okay.
But particularly men and women need to engage these things because there's so many gender-based differences in the way that men and women communicate in general that making it easy is the best thing you can possibly do if there are tools available. And yes, there are tools available. So when you make the appointment to talk, food can be a distraction.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is, if you can, try to eat 2 or 3 hours before the conversation so that you're not starving in the conversation or that the food isn't distracting from the conversation material.
Okay.
And also try to talk face to face. Some people have their juries still out on that. I've heard people advocate that if you need to have a serious conversation, you should probably try to have it over the phone so that you don't see if the person is annoyed with whatever you're saying. And I think that's very unhealthy in that general premise. Many times, a face to face conversation is more beneficial because if you see that person responding to what you've said with complete shock, they didn't know that that's how you felt. They didn't know that that's where you were feeling, didn't know any of those things. Then you're more willing to forgive them and try to work something out if you see that they didn't know you were bothered by whatever they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, face to face is better if you can. But if long distance happens to be an impediment, then phone is the next best thing. I do not recommend having long, intensive, serious discussions via text. Do not
Okay.
recommend it. So if you can't be face to face, phone is better. But I put face to face as a priority there.
Yeah. Texting is like you really don't know what the word no means or how emphasized the word no is.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And the primary reason for the timing of the conversation is just to minimize distractions.
Okay.
Don't talk right after work because that person just got off work and they're distracted by how tired they are. Don't talk right after they've just had a good time because they're thinking about that good time they've had and you're going to ruin it if you bring up some bad news at that point. Don't talk about things when you have your favorite food in front of you because that food is going to become a distraction. All of these timing premises have one thing in common, and that is to minimize the distraction. And the minimized distractions help create the optimal communicative exchange environment. I'm going to make an acronym for that because I
Okay.
say it a lot. The optimal communicative exchange environment is what you always try to create when you're talking to someone. So best that best prepares them as far as they are willing to hear you. So one of the things,
There's two people.
yeah, again, those are my same guy. I think I've named them Bill and Katie. I think a very important point about having a relationship, particularly between a man and a woman, we have
The heart.
the state of our union talks.
Okay.
Every year, the president gives the state of the union. He talks about war, he talks about education, he talks about the monetary deficits, he talks about the goals that he has for the remaining part of his administration. And every year, we hear these state of the union talks from the president.
Uh
The,
huh.
the state of our union is the same concept. You and your person talk about the condition of your relationship. Is this still working for you? Is something is there something that we need to change? Is there something that we need to implement? Is there something that I've begun to do that annoys you? I This is the opportunity for me to say, if there's something you've begun to do that annoys me, is this relationship still working for both of us? That is a state of our union talk.
So, in so many words, it's kind of like a evaluation, a check-in.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's a
we do a
check
lot
in
of that.
relationship. Wonderful. Now, if you're in a new relationship, you might want to have that conversation around every 6 months or so to make sure that both of you are still on the same page.
Right.
But if you've been married 20 years, you might do it once a year, maybe fewer. It just depends on you and your person and how you're working together in this relationship context. I don't know that I would recommend doing it once a month, because a month is not a lot of time for somebody to grow and need to readjust things in their relationship with a person, unless something huge happens that could
Okay.
impact the life of the relationship.
Okay.
And if
I can
you
see that too. Like a death or just a traumatic situation. I can see something like that.
An out of state job could be something
Right.
that makes
Right.
two people sit down and say, are we going to try to work through this distance, or has what we have run its course? That is a state of our union talk. And I was going to say also that once a month might be too soon or too regular or too often, is what I was trying to say. And
Okay.
if you set a schedule, if something happens that you need to have that talk that's not on the schedule, have it anyway.
Okay.
Don't stick to the schedule just because it's in place. If there's something arises that makes you need to have a state of our union conversation, absolutely. And these are the questions so far. If you have any questions about the material that we've covered so far.
Okay. No, I actually spoke up with some of them, and let's see, the hearing versus listening. Uh, Avoid the holidays. I'm good with the holidays because we really don't celebrate those things in
Okay.
the sense of society, anyway. Uh,
Mhm.
I can say that I definitely have to work on the make appointments because soon as she jumps in the car, I'm like,
Okay. So now let's move into the next part of the presentation for this
God, I'm so
evening.
sorry. I keep turning my camera off, but this is a big old mosquito. Just keep. I don't want
Oh, I am
to.
not a fan. I am not a fan of mosquitoes. That mosquito and all of his colony can be eradicated right now. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm over here doing. I don't want to be distracted. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. So for fair fighting, now most people hear the term fair fighting and they understand it to be something that they are supposed to do, that
Right.
they're not supposed to fight unfairly. So for our remaining time this evening, we're going to go through what fair fighting is, talk about getting off the playing field. We're going to get into logic, which is something I absolutely love, the
Okay.
understanding that there's more than one right way to do things, how to stay on the point, and the involvement that your friends should have in these types of situations. And then for chapter 12, we're going to do shopping together.
Okay.
So for chapter 11, fair fighting is simply avoiding the use of information or past situations that are difficult for the other person, possibly with intent just to inflict pain. Many times, okay, well, there's an example that I have in my book. There's a man and a woman who live together, and she has absolutely had her threshold reached and crossed about the fact that this man will not pick up his socks
Mm.
from the floor. She tells him to pick up his socks from the floor all the time. Pick up your socks, pick up your socks, pick up your socks.
Make sure
He
I get
is
my socks on.
tired of hearing her complain about this. So he says, our dog Husky used to pick them up off the floor before you backed over him. That is not fair fighting. That is not fair fighting. That is not fair fighting. He said that with intent to inflict pain on her so she
Wow.
would not continue whatever she was saying. Needless reminders of past mistakes, attacking someone's appearance when the discussion is about behavior, references to familiar circumstances or upbringing, and the Husky example that I just gave. All of those are examples of unfair fighting.
Right.
Now, one of the problems with unfair fighting, oh my goodness, I see this all the time. I don't watch a lot of TV because the rampant dysfunction in it just irks my soul sometimes. And I have to wonder how people expect to have healthy, cohesive relationships when they continually feed themselves dysfunctional nonsense. One of the things I've frequently seen in a variety of TV shows is unfair fighting.
Right.
One person will say the most painful thing to the other person just for that half a microsecond expression of disgust, disappointment, shame, hurt, whatever it is on that person's face. Because that seems to be what society wants. So you hurt the person as bad as you possibly can just for that little second's worth of watching them suffer about it. And then they say, well, I'm sorry, but I said that because A, B, C, and D. And then they move on like you didn't just emotionally injure that person.
Yeah, one of the kids did me like that today. Hmm.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and then asked me could they play a game, and I'm like, nope.
Now,
Mm-mm.
it's not fair at all to hurt someone intentionally just because you don't want to hear what they're saying or you don't want them to continue saying it in reminding you of whatever it is. So we understand that that isn't fair, but I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Do men or women unfair fight more often? Who would you say?
Whew, that's uh, All right, don't. I'm gonna go ahead and say it.
What do you
I
think?
I will probably say that women may have a better art at it because they can use their tongue a little bit better than we can when it comes to verbiage and how they yeah. Um I think some men can just be petty when it comes to, so it may be just balance because I really think like with even though like you had the example with the dude talking about the husky and whatnot, um I think men use past tense or life experiences or trauma to be unfair, and I think women are more verbal with words and talking down to or saying certain stuff. So for me with that, I think it's somewhat balanced depending on.
You are 100% right. You are
Yeah.
100% right. I concede that because this is a verbal tool and women often have a better command of verbal tools than men, that
Hmm.
women can be better at this just because of the verbal nature of it.
Yeah.
However, however, the balance is that doesn't necessarily mean that her intentions are always more harmful than his.
Right.
So that's how this plays out both ways. Women are certainly more capable of it because it's a verbal tool, but men have just as effective ways to hurt her in retaliation when
There you
words
go.
have nothing to do with it.
Bring the whole family
I bring the whole family in.
in. Yeah. Yeah. Ain't nobody talking about your daddy club foot.
Ooh. Oh, mercy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. For the next point on fair fighting, we talk about getting off the playing field. What does that mean? Scorecards, point systems, keeping track of every little thing has its place, just not in relationships. Everything is not about a competition.
What?
Everything is not winner or loser. The winner should be the relationship where both people are giving of themselves to find agreement. Not you won this one, so I have to win the next one. That
Uh-huh.
tends to make people unreasonable
Mm.
because their objective is winning, not listening. So get off the playing field. And a question that I had in this entire discussion research bubble about fair fighting was, have you ever heard men say that they feel competition when women buy them gifts? And now he has to out gift her and give her something better than what she gave to him.
You know what? Personally, me, no, I haven't.
Hmm. Okay. I've heard men actually say that if his girlfriend gives him something, then he feels responsible to give her a better gift
Mm-mm.
than what she gave him. And some of that is the whole toxic masculinity thing, that the man has to be the top, he has to be the best, he has to be the winner, he has to be all of this.
Mm.
So if she gives him a gift, then he has to return and give her a better one just to one up her, because that's the alpha male type thing that
Nope.
guys are supposed to do. And
This
I
ain't no
hope
alpha male then.
ridiculous that is in my gesturing. But there are men who actually believe that. And I think that they would do well to consider this particular point of what we're speaking right now.
Okay.
Sometimes women buy her man gifts because she wants him to have it, not because she's trying to engage him in a gift giving conversation.
Yeah.
That isn't always her motive. Some people play that way, but it's not always the motive of a woman who gives her man a gift to make him give her something better. And next, we're going to talk about,
Yep. Your logic. All righty. Here we
yes,
go.
What
See how
is
bad you gonna beat me up?
what is logic?
Mm.
It is, first of all, not as objective as people think it is. And I love this point when we really get into discussing this. Logic is not as objective as people generally think it is, because logic is the process by which certain input variables deliver a projected outcome. Now, this isn't the conventional logic that everybody just assumes to be all the same because it's logic, it must be objective. No, I'm talking about logic from a technical point, from
Hmm.
a programmer's point, if you will. Computer
Okay.
science for a couple of years, and that's a whole different story. But my point is, if you have a flower, what is, if you have a flower,
Mm.
you give that flower water, you give that
Okay.
flower sunlight, you give that flower food. It is logical that that flower will live. Okay.
Okay.
But if you have a different flower that you don't put it in the sun, you don't water it, you don't give it food, it is logical that that flower will die.
Mm.
You
Okay.
have a living flower and you have a dead flower,
Mm.
but both of those circumstances were derived from logical processes. How is it that two things can be the opposite and both be logical? That point is where a lot of men and women don't see eye to eye. That's the catalyst, the crusp of where they need to identify and reconsider what they're talking about and what they have value in. Because again, logic is not as objective as people think it is. It is the process by which certain input variables deliver a projected outcome. So if you change the input variables, you change what the logical outcome should be. And when people's input factors are a different experience, they're both going to believe that they're both being logical, and they're ending up with opposite conclusions when they're both being logical.
Mm.
They don't understand why that happens because they're not peeling back the layers and exploring the input variables that contributed to why this person said one thing was logical and the different input variables that contributed to why this person said the other thing was logical. And the explanation and the consideration of what logic really is will be the life or death of certain relationships. Because what is logical to one person may be illogical to the other person, and they're both employing what they call logic. The difference is the input factors. The difference is what contributes to why that person thinks this outcome is logical versus why the other person thinks a different outcome is logical.
Okay.
So, to get to that, what people need to do is ask, why do you see it that way? And begin to consider the other person's input factors and work toward that understanding. People
So
don't do
it's
that. They
it's
don't.
so
They, I'm sorry, go ahead.
now I was just gonna say so it's like logically 2 plus 2 is 4, just like 2 times 2 is 4.
Yes, actually.
While he was saying it, I'm up here doing math. I'm like,
The difference, well, the difference with that example is that they both have the same input factors, two sets of two. How they get to the same conclusion would be a miracle of conversation, really, if you're talking about certain things. But with logic, the problem becomes when they're on different spectrums.
okay,
Spectrums
so what about this example? I came across a TikTok where if you use your crap, you use your birthday and uh how old you are, I think that's what it was. Yeah, your birth, your I mean, how old you are and your the year you was born, you come up with 2022.
That has nothing to do with logic. That is the most numeric coincidence. But no,
I
okay,
tried.
we messing with this. I got it. I got it. Okay.
All right, I tried. I tried. Okay.
But when people look at the same situation and derive a different conclusion about that same situation, what the other person needs to do is explore that other person's input factors. Why do
Mhm.
you see it that way? What is contributing to the conclusion that you've drawn? That question is not condemning, it's not condescending. Well, it shouldn't be, but it can be presented in a way that would make one believe that. But no, the objective thing to do would be to discover how that person got to the conclusion that they saw. And in that, you will likely reveal the different input factors that contributed to the different outcome factors when they were both being logical.
Right.
His logic and her logic are obviously different, but they are both being what they feel like is logical, and neither would agree the other is using logic.
Okay.
That's why you have to deal with the input factors. What has contributed to how you see this the way that you see it? And that's a very easy question to ask when a communicative impasse has occurred and understanding is at a standstill.
Okay.
And another main problem with logic is the use of logic is that it usually supposes that the end result should be right. And that's not necessarily always true if you consider how subjective what one person thinks is logical really is. There are women who think if I sleep with him, it is logical for him to commit to me when
Mm.
she knows that does not work.
Boy, I tell you.
What are
Mm.
her input factors? What is contributing to why she believes that? Even though that's what she thinks is the right answer, it's not, especially when she knows it's not, but she does it anyway, thinking that something different will happen. But
Logically, if
that
I have great sex with her, she's gonna be my woman, right?
yeah, there are guys who said similar things, and there are guys who really, really, really want the opposite. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have sex with this woman and hope I never see her again, but for more great sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the input factors that contribute to what they think is logical? And if those input factors are different from somebody else's input factors, they will both use logic as they come to the opposite conclusion. Thank you, communication. That's what happens. And this is again what I said a minute ago. Being logical isn't actually as structured as most people think it is because of this. The expanded consideration of what is logical enables you to more easily consider the other person's perspective and ask them, why do you think that? What happened that contributed to your conclusion?
Okay.
Why do you see it that way? And that
Okay.
changes the whole tone of the conversation. And
I can
even
see
if
that.
you understand, where do you go from there? What's next?
Simple conclusion.
There's more than one right way to do things.
Man, tell me about it. Yeah, you
Two
make
plus
it's trauma. Cause trying to do this homework with these kids is like, bro, it's another way you can do this. Huh? They got you going through mountains and the jungles and stuff, man. You can just cross the street right there to get that answer. They try to make you go in there. Okay, all right,
2 plus 2 equals 4.
right,
1 plus 3 equals 4. Half
right.
plus half equals 4. There is more than one right way to do things. And when people recognize that, I, they will be ready to relax their own rigid views of their singular way of propriety. This is
Would you
right.
consider that being a control factor as well?
Sometimes it is, absolutely. Yes. There may be more than one right way to do it, but you're going to do it the way I said.
Right.
No, that's not necessary. That's not necessary. And when you're dealing with a person who believes that way and feels that way, communication is not the problem. Their stubbornness is.
Okay.
And next time we will talk about stubbornness as an
Mm-mm.
impediment to the communication process. Absolutely, we're going to get into that next time.
Mm.
But for furthering here with what fair fighting is and what it should, how it should not happen, understanding that there's more than one right way to do things redirects the people's focus away from who's right and they move the focus on what they can agree is best.
Okay.
And when you've taken it off the field, when you're not competing with that person, when you're not going for a win, when there's no reason in it,
Okay.
your attitude toward the discussion changes. And then you move forward together. And this is the way that you end those dead end arguments that don't go anywhere and people waste millions of life hours fighting for nothing because no one will ever win even if they're both right.
Okay.
Their approaches to the issue has to be to consider what the other person is thinking and try for both of them to see it from the other person's side, and then you can work together to resolve whatever the issue is, unless it's something like cheating. That no, that's a whole different thing.
Okay.
But these principles are solid and applicable in most situations. And the next thing we have, where's my cursor? Okay.
Oh, ooh, they look mad. They look
uh,
jealous.
Aspect of fair fighting. I absolutely love this one too. I know if you can tell. Uh, Staying
Ooh.
on the point when you fight. Stay on the point. Let's follow this example right quick.
Mm.
She says, I can't believe you did that. You told me I could spend time with Dinner Dan. No, I didn't.
Everything.
Invite Dinner Dan over. Going out or him coming over, I was still with him. What's the difference? She says, stop screaming at me. You always scream at me. I'm tired of it. And then he says, you screamed at me first. And she says, since when? Then he's right back. That time you came home drunk, that made me sick. I was so mad. Yes, I screamed. Then she says, I was out with my girls celebrating a big job I finished. So what? I got drunk. Then he says, I hate Kissy Kate. She's a whore and you don't need to be with her. I told you you can't go out with her anymore. You should pick better friends. He's like going off. Then she says, you're not my father. You can't tell me what to do. I can hang out with whoever I want. Who are you? And then he says, you know what? She can't come over here anymore and bring her whorish friends. Then she says, fine, I'll meet them at the club since you don't spend time with me anyway. You don't treat me right anymore. Forget it. It's over. He's like, what just happened?
Oh boy.
Now, after this has happened a million times in a million different households, what were they fighting about?
Yeah, I've done that a couple times in a few relationships.
What started this whole argument was
Dinner Dan. Don't
I
you?
told you to invite Dinner Dan over, and the guy went out with Dan instead of bringing Dan over to the house. That's what started the fight. But look at how many different things they got off on off the other point.
Yep.
Excuse me. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you're good. 'Cause I'm just
So
on.
as we're looking at this argument, we know what started the fight,
Hmm.
and now he's running away. Trying to- the other issues in this argument that came up were she feels like he screams at her all the time, and he says she screams at him too,
You're right.
and he doesn't like her friends. And now she's saying that he doesn't spend time with her like he used to, and all of these other issues. All of that came up in the fight about him going out with Dinner Dan
Dan. Yeah.
instead of bringing him over like she said.
So that was like
So
one, two, three, four, five fights in one fight.
exactly. So when you're having these types of discussions, we're calling them fights for the sake of the discussion, but when you're having these conversations with your person, staying on point becomes critical. Dealing with what you're actually dealing with is imperative to resolving it. That doesn't mean that the other issues aren't important,
Right.
but deal with those a little bit later. Focus here on the issue. She told him to bring Dan over, but he went
Mm.
out with Dan instead.
She liked
Now,
it,
like I
Dan.
huh? I didn't hear you. I'm
I
sorry.
almost said she liked it, Dan.
The other issues are important, but just not connected to the main point. Now, another question. What would Dinner Dan say all about this? Now, I thought his name was Bill a few minutes ago, so it's actually Dan here. What
Uh,
did Dan say about all this? That brings us to the next point. How far your friends should be in your discussions.
mm.
Is it ever acceptable to talk to your closest friends about your relationship problems? Society,
I would just be personally. Maybe only when you and your partner can't come to some form of agreement. Maybe you can ask, can you bring in an outside person? Maybe.
I'll get into that in just a little bit, but
Okay.
society accepts that women would likely say yes to that question. I remember I saw something on social media that tells the guys if your girlfriend or your wife has a best friend, a a shopping buddy,
Uh,
and a gossip pal, or her aunt or somebody,
uh.
those are the executive director board of your relationship.
Ah.
Now, I don't remember exactly who they said, but it was the point of if this woman has all of these close friends, those are the people that she's going to be talking to about the way this relationship is run. I
Right.
do not, I do not condone that. I absolutely don't condone that. But to answer the question, it depends on the friend because there are some friends that give you bad advice and then you take that advice because they're your friends and you ruin your situation that was already 10 times better than the situation of the person who's giving you this bad advice.
Right.
So whether or not you involve your friends depends on that friend. I don't recommend it in general. And to your point about getting an outside perspective, if people are considering being in a serious relationship, even unto marriage, one of the things that I believe they should decide beforehand is who that objective third party will be.
Right.
Just sit down together and say, if we get into an argument that we can't work out by ourselves, Who can we both agree to go to for advice?
Okay.
A lot of Christians, it's some pastor. For somebody else in a professional environment, it might be a mentor, or somebody that both people can agree will be objective and give wise counsel in that situation.
Right.
Your friends are not always the best people to
Wise
be.
counsel. Nope. Mm-mm.
No,
They sure
no,
are not.
it depends on the friend,
Right.
but oftentimes a lot of them are not situated to give wise advice.
Okay.
So if you're venting to your friends, you should be careful, because if your friend takes your venting complaints as more seriously than you, when they repeat your own words back to you in affirmation, they magnify the issue in your own mind,
You're
just
right.
reciting what you feel. So now something that wasn't that big a deal has become a bigger deal just because of your friend's affirmation of your complaint about it. That's unnecessary. That doesn't need to happen. It can stop very easily. And sometimes what you complain about looks worse on you than it does the person that you're claiming is wrong for it.
Right.
With that, I have to say this: men who live with a woman, if she keeps asking you to pick up your socks and you don't have a dog to blame, it's not fair for you to call her a nag when she's asked you 52 times and you're the one being inconsiderate and thoughtless to ignore this concern she's expressing to you.
What?
Oftentimes, women are called nags because they say the same things to men over and over and over and over and over. But if that man would reply the first time, maybe even the second, then she would have no reason to repeat her request multiple times for him to then turn around and call her the nag when he was the one who was being irresponsible and inconsiderate.
Right.
So that example is different than what I'm talking about here, in the premise of what you're complaining about can look worse on you than the person about whom you're complaining. This woman who is complaining about her boyfriend or her husband that won't pick up his socks, we can get that. We can understand that. But suppose a woman was complaining, oh, my boyfriend works too much. He works too much. He makes all this money and he buys me all this stuff, but I just want him to have lunch with me some days. When she's complaining about that to all her bitter friends who
Mm.
don't have boyfriends, they're
No,
looking
he
at
don't. He shouldn't be
her.
doing you like that.
Exactly. And and when I say her bitter friends, I'm not talking about her women friends in general. Please detach bitter from female in general. And I'm not speaking specifically to you. I'm talking about in concept in general. I
Mm.
am talking about women who are actually bitter,
Right.
not generalizing that women who talk to their girlfriends are all bitter. That's not what I'm saying. I'm
Trust me, there's
talking,
some men out there the same way, so they fit in that category too.
okay, very true, very true. When I'm saying that, I'm talking about her complaints to people who are not qualified to give her wise advice
Right.
because of their bad experiences that they will not process through. Her complaining can look worse on her than it does the guy or whoever is the one who is being complained about. Now, this is my personal pedestal here.
Okay.
Respect for the commitment to the relationship. There's some things that you shouldn't say to other people, even if you are only venting. If a woman has complaints about her man's sexual performance and she's talking to one person who may be a doctor, sure, okay. But that's not coffee table talk for you and your girlfriends over brunch.
Mm.
Something like that should be, not even the sexual performance being the pinnacle of what
Yeah.
should be between the two. It could be money problems. It could be depression. It could be other emotional things. That the commitment to the relationship and respect for the relationship should take precedence. And some things just don't need to be said out of respect for the relationship.
Right.
Sex is the easiest one that people can understand about that premise. But it comes to money, it deals with money, it deals with emotional circumstances, it deals with problems that he might be having at work, problems that she might be having at work that she can see is affecting her relationship. To the person. Talk to the person you're in a relationship with and not 5,000 other people first. So, out of respect for the relationship, there's some things that don't need to be said, even if you are only venting. That does not mean don't get wise counsel, but you have to go to the right places for the wise counsel. And that's not everywhere. Wise counsel right here. I had to, I couldn't resist. Uh, but while we're talking about the sanctity of a relationship, don't let that cloud your judgment against talking about abuse.
Okay.
Don't let somebody tell you this is our relationship. What happens in our house stays in our house if you're being abused. That is not what I'm condoning. That is not at all what I'm talking about. There's a distinct difference between having respect of the relationship and then using the respect of that relationship to hide abuses. I do not condone the hiding of abuses. That is not acceptable.
Right.
Full stop. QED. I wanted to say that. And should you vent to friends of the opposite sex? Again, that depends on the topic and the friend.
And the friend.
Yeah. If your problems, if the situation you're complaining about is better than the situation that they're in, you might make them jealous. And then they might try to sabotage you
Right.
and create problems in your relationship. Again, people do these kinds of things. Not everybody, but enough people do that we understand the premise as we're talking about it. And if all you do is complain about your partner, you open the consideration of how that friend could meet the needs of that partner that you're not. This is how affairs start. It's that simple. A lot
Okay.
of people like, oh my God, I've just had this affair. How did I even get here? This is your answer.
You know how you got there.
This is how you got here.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for all of the bad decisions that follow it, but this is where it can start. Affairs can begin venting to your opposite sex friends about your relationship problems. I
Yeah.
am not saying that this happens for everybody, but it happens enough that we're clear on this principle. It's easily accepted, and we've probably seen it more than once in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Again, is why affairs are never accidents. There are too many steps involved. They are bad decisions, yes, but that doesn't mean that they're dismissible with the innocence of an accident. A series of bad decisions is a series of bad decisions, and not one of them was taken unintentionally.
I, I know this is straight off topic, but I guess that's a pet peeve for me that I've been trying to figure out. And I think I've asked this question a couple of times with friends and just random people on social media. Uh, if you know you're finna go out and cheat, why can't you call your partner and say, "Hey, I'm finna make this bad decision, and so we might as well just call it quit." And people answer is, "What am I telling myself for?" Like,
That deals with a level of maturity that is lacking, I'll
yes,
say, to be, diplomatic. But absolutely, yeah, that happens all the time. That happens all the time. And that's exactly what people say all the time. And to
it's an
this point,
accident. I guess that's the reason why I brought it up because people say that. Oh, it wasn't what you thought. It was an accident. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew exactly what you were doing.
If it was an accident, how many men have ever tripped on the sidewalk and ended up with their genitalia in one of the sidewalk cracks?
It just happened yesterday. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. I always wanted to say that. I'm sorry. My bad. You opened the door for that one. I'm sorry. But yeah, but again, that's why I was like, how when people say that, oh man, it's not what you think. It just happened. So you trying to tell me you and my best friend in the bed together, it ain't what I think. You're naked. I actually caught y'all in the position, probably mid stroke. It ain't what I think. Oh, okay. Oh man, I need to go get a doctor check or something.
Oh my god, exactly. There are too many decisions involved for it to be an accident.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe you need some more stable shoes, man, so you don't trip on the sidewalk anymore. But as we're talking about infidelity, why have I put this point under fair fighting? Because many times a person will say, why can't you be like somebody else?
Mm,
Why can't you be like my homegirl's girlfriend? Why can't you be
wow.
like his wife? Why can't you be like her husband? That is unacceptable.
Mm,
That is unacceptable. Full stop. I don't know that I have too much more to say about that. But in in a situation where somebody is trying to fight fair, comparison to another person is not what they want to do. They do
right.
not want to compare their spouse to another person and throw in their spouse's face what that other person has that in that moment at least they don't. That is unacceptable. That there is no way that is fighting fair, like at all.
I can see that.
So for the while we're talking about men and women complaining to their opposite gender friends about their relationship problems, can men and women be platonic friends? Oh my God. People have wasted hours in discussion about this question because what because they feel like what makes it wrong for them as an individual makes it wrong for everybody, and it doesn't. Some others feel like what makes it right for them as an individual makes it right for everybody else, and it doesn't. I've done a video on this a long time ago, and I compare this to driving. Can
Uh-huh.
everybody drive a car?
Right.
That
Mm-hmm.
question is too broad because not everybody has a driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody knows the rules of the road. And sometimes when people do know the rules of their road, they get out there and they cut people off. They don't use their turn signal, and all kinds of problems ensue. So you can't ask the question, can everybody drive, in application to everybody? Because the question is too broad. There are too many specifics about each person's individual experience for that to be answered properly for everyone in one broad brushstroke. In this same way is this question: can men and women be platonic friends? It's too broad because some people can handle it and some people can't. Some women were raised around a lot of men. So it's easy for them to interact platonically with men and not see them only as the other half of somebody's relationship. But if the woman was raised where all she thought about was how this man is going to be her husband, even though he only opened the door for her, she might have a difficulty maintaining a platonic relationship with a guy. But what would make it wrong for her doesn't make it wrong for everybody. And that's the problem with this question. Can men and women be platonic friends? Some men and some women can. but not all of them. And every time a person takes what's right for them and makes it right for everybody, they get it wrong. Every time a person takes what's wrong for them and makes it wrong for everybody, they get it wrong.
Right.
That's why hours and hours of time have been wasted on that discussion, because people address it from the wrong premise. And if they get the right premise, they'll finally get the right answer, which is what
Okay.
we have here. Some people can handle it and some people can't. That doesn't make it right or wrong for everybody as a whole. And that is the quick answer to the question of
Mm, mm,
getting
mm.
platonic friends. And we have a few talking points on fighting fair. I can just run through these very quickly. Feel free to jump in anytime you want.
Okay.
Feel like every conversation is a competition. If so, can you tell when that started? Will you try a timeout to get off the playing field? That's a talking point for people in relationships to discover and discuss through if they've run into that particular impediment in their communication process. Is it hard to stay focused on the main point, as we saw with the argument and the bubbles? And
Yeah.
I thought that it was very effective to make tangible the things that they were saying back and forth to each other, to draw them out and focus on them as to what the main point was and how easy it became to get off into other important things, but not that main issue they should have
Right.
stayed on point for addressing. Are there times when you involve mutual friends in venting, but other times when you don't need to involve them? Are the people happy? Are they jealous? Are they bitter? Are they depressed? That needs to be considered in the question.
I think Miss Melody was referring to the not being able to talk to the opposite sex. I say
Mhm.
yes, but my husband says not always. And that's pretty much what you were saying, Miss Melody, that it really depends on the person. Uh, I and even if that person can talk to the opposite sex with no problem, unfortunately, you still have to be weary about the opposite sex because they may have an alternative thing going on too. So it you really just have to pay attention when you're doing stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agree. Absolutely. And for the fourth talking point on fair fighting, what outside influences do you allow to affect your relationship by what you say to your partner because of those outside influences? And another final point for talking points on fair fighting: what do you think of men and women being platonic friends? And we just talked about that a little bit from Miss Melody's perspective. And this is the conclusion of our fair fighting part. But we have one more tonight. We have one
All
more
right.
tonight.
All
The
right.
last one that we're talking about for tonight is
You
Dan
up,
and Katie.
up, mm, mm-mm,
I
mm-mm.
have a quick example of a story I want to share with you guys. This happened. This is a true story. This is absolutely 100% true. When I was little, I went Christmas tree shopping with my mother and my father together. My mother had my hand, and we were walking down the aisles through the trees, and we saw the lights, and some of them had garlands, some of them had tinsel, and we're strolling along casually through the Christmas tree aisle. And my mother looked up and wondered, "Where's my father?"
Mm.
We both turned around and looked to find him. He has a boxed tree under his arm, headed out the door that he had paid for already.
So he wasn't getting no live tree. Y'all was looking at live tree.
No, we were looking at the decorated trees, taking our time browsing when he had come in
Oh,
to make his purchase of the tree and get out.
oh, okay.
I learned
Yeah.
moment, I learned in that moment one of the differences between the ways that men and women shop. If we use my parents for this example, I had to
Wow.
be maybe six.
Wow.
So this conversation has been in my life for a long time.
Dad said, go in and get
Yes,
out.
that's the way it typically goes. When men go into a store, they go in with an objective, they get what they need, and they get out. When women shop, sometimes it takes an extra time because she's looking at all of the various options before she wants to mull over a decision and all of these types of things. And that's why she's in the store all day. No,
Mm.
that difference in the way that men and women shop took root in my soul from that one night example of my parents. Absolutely. But while we're talking about that, most guys hate shopping with women because they don't want to be trapped in the store all day. And the easy way to resolve that is to give him a time limit and an objective. Tell him, I want to go to the store to find a blue dress, a floral blouse, and a pink skirt. So now he knows what you're looking for. And
Okay.
I'm thinking I'm going to take about 2 hours to find it.
Okay.
Now, if he has these parameters in his mind and you go to the first store, it's not there, you still have time to go to two or three stores because he knows what you're looking for, the blue dress, the floral skirt, and the pink blouse, or whatever it was I said earlier.
But
Those
he
are
ain't helping though.
things. Well, some guys don't, and we'll get to that shortly. But for him to have an objective and a time limit, he knows that he's going to get in and out of the store before the model year on his car changes. And then you can move through the various things. There's a comment here.
Yes, Miss Jessica says my husband actually likes shopping with me. We be picking out ugly stuff. We be picking out ugly stuff, but he tried. But Jessica, I'm sorry to tell you that I pick out beautiful things for my wife when I go shopping. I like shopping with my wife too. That's what I was finna say. Like, dude, if you help her shop, matter of fact, you know what? My wife don't even really go shopping as much. She shop online more.
He picks out ugly. I'm so sorry, Jessica.
We gotta fix your husband. He can't be buying you ugly stuff.
Right, exactly. But see, the idea is that he has an objective. He knows why he's in the store. He knows how long he's possibly going to be there. And that enables him to get through the experience without feeling trapped. And for the men, have you ever heard a woman say, with a closet full of new clothes, I have nothing to wear? The translation of that is very simple. I have nothing to wear that reflects how I feel. If she feels happy, she might want to wear something floral, but all of her clothes are solid color, professional work clothes. So I have nothing to wear. I have nothing to wear that shows how I feel. So now we're going shopping for some floral dresses. That's how
Uh,
those 2 points can be brought together. But for guys to understand, that's typically what a woman is saying when she says, standing in front of a closet full of clothes, some of them still had price tags, I have nothing to wear. It's not about the actual garments, it's about something that will reflect how she feels. Also, if there's a specific event that she might need a specific outfit for, if she is a soccer mom, khakis, cardigans, shirts, pants, the stuff that you can jump into really easy to get the kids off to school or whatever have you. Now you're invited to a formal gala. You have nothing to wear because most of your clothes fit a different type of lifestyle.
right.
That would be a time that she would need something specific, which
Hmm.
is a formal dress.
Right.
Now we have this objective. that he can get his mind around, and he's comfortable. Many guys would be comfortable going shopping for something that they have an objective for, that they know
Okay.
what they're going for, they know what's happening inside in the store. And the that's pretty much the bottom line of the difference between shopping for men and women as they shop together. When a guy is shopping, he needs an objective and a time limit to shop with a woman. And guys, when a woman needs to go shopping to get something to wear, it's something that's geared toward talking more about how she feels than what she's actually wearing. Of course, ask her if you have any questions, but understand that some of what I'm saying right now may be the encapsulation of the answer. And at the very least, this will help you talk with her about what she's going to get and what her objectives in shopping will be.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about timing, fair fighting, and shopping together?
Well, the uh the timing was a great experience because you just basically told me that I need to shut up and don't talk to my wife when she get in the car. So that was very rude, but that's okay. That's it. You just like you just like making me feel bad, but that's okay. The shopping, I can't really I, fair fight. I don't really. A church I used to go to um, in Atlanta basically brought that to my attention, and it's something that I brought into this marriage as well. We don't call it fair fighting, or we don't call it out as fair fighting. We just fair fight. So it's
Absolutely.
not a sense of where we have to say, I need to call a fair fight, baby, because this is going on. But it's just something that, uh, it's one of those situations where we really need to talk about the topic, or we may, with me, sometimes I may have to take a break from it and go through a process
Hmm.
because I might not have gotten out what I needed to have, getting, said it right and explain myself. Because sometimes we can get into defensive mode when someone is not seeing what or hearing what we're trying to explain. Not saying that they have to agree with it, but if there's a notion of they're just not understanding,
Hmm.
and I can find myself in that situation where I have to stop for a moment and then do something. But the shopping, I'm always shopping. I hate going into Walmart or just clothing store or going past the clothing store because my mind says, "Oh, your wife will look good in it." Yeah, so it's not good for me to go shopping, right? And right now, you talked about events. We got a gold event to go to next year for
Hmm.
the listening party. So
Yes.
we definitely can go. At black last time and white before that. So now we got to do gold. So
Yes.
yeah.
I know that it's so funny. I tend to shop like my father. I go into a store, I need to get what I need to get, and I need to get out. And
Yep.
that isn't necessarily because I'm afraid to spend too much money. I'm more afraid to waste the time. I need to get in and get out because I have other things I want to do.
Yeah. That's my wife. I can say if she's by herself, she is in and out. If we are together, I think there is a moment of I think we just mesh together and be like, ooh, that's nice. Ooh, what's that? Ooh, yeah. So if she's by herself, she normally is in and out. Me by myself, I'm that person that's supposed to go get a loaf of bread and I come out with a baggie. Yeah. So
Well, that has been this presentation for this evening on the topics of timing, fair fighting, and shopping together. But let next time we meet on April 12th will be the final presentation of the material in my book. We'll be talking about professional situations, mixed messages, good problems that good communication won't solve, which was the stubbornness is one that we had talked about earlier tonight.
Okay.
And of course, we will bring all of these matters to a conclusion. I will work to put all of our past shows on YouTube. So if there's any viewer out there who wants to review some of the material before we get to the final conclusion on April 12th, that will be available to you, ideally before this next weekend is over. But April 12th
Mhm.
will be the next time that we're together for the final chapters of Truth Speak. Some real
Yep.
reasons men and women don't communicate.
I um have the two of them uploading, or the other two that I didn't send to you uploading now, and this one should be uploaded to the hard drive by no later to tomorrow. So you have access to all three of them to download and upload
Wonderful.
for everybody.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No problem. So
It-
I say that what do I have next Wednesday? Let's see. We do have 101 TKO radio this Saturday, 10 o'clock, guys. Um, so definitely the mailroom, 101 TKO radio.com, 10 o'clock Saturday. We will be talking to a director and on his movie, DJ Smooth. He directed a movie called Joy, the based off of the book of Job. And it was pretty cool. I like the spin off of it. And but next Saturday, we will be having some guests. And as soon as I can find that piece of paper here, not next Saturday, I mean next Wednesday. We are going to have, that's going to be the 15th. We're going to have the lovely Mr. Sean on, and we're going to be talking about how can I find someone that's willing to elevate with me as much as I'm willing to elevate with them.
Wonderful.
Yep. So, until then, guys, we shall see you later, and we totally appreciate you again, Miss Whitney, for just making me feel just bad. So, guys, I did not know what I was signing up for, and I was just too, it was just too far gone. Uh, uh, I'm going to talk to my publisher for real about this. But damn, I forgot you worked in the lawyer's office. So yeah, dang, I can't win for losing, man. Whatever. I'm done with this here. But guys, we do love y'all, and you have a great day, night, Miss Whitney, and everybody else that's watching Facebook and YouTube. Please hit that like button and get us going on in the I can't even think of that word now because I just realized that Miss Whitney worked in the lawyer's office. So let me get off this thing. I incriminate myself. Good night, y'all. Y'all have a good night.